Diablo 4 versus Path of Exile. Yeah, we know who wins. It's pretty obvious, ain't it?
So if you've watched some of my other videos where I explain both Diablo 4 and Path of Exile, you remember the graph goes something like this. You're going to end up seeing Diablo 4 players enjoy the game a lot right out of the gate. It is going to flatline as they hit more of the end game, and then we see a either steady decline or just a straight flatline in terms of enjoyability with the game, right?
True. I think this graph is pretty appropriate. I would say that this spot to this spot is like roughly level 30. Then this spot is like level 50 because it takes a long time, honestly. It still takes too much. Again, the world tiers are a problem because everyone just tries to get to world tier 3 as fast as possible, and then at one point, well, world tier 4 as fast as possible. So this is until level 30, this is like level 50, and then it's either downhill or, you know, nothing really improves a lot. It is what it is. Accurate.
Here peaking around level 70, right around completing the campaign, interacting with whatever in-game mechanics there might be, doing your first Durio run, attempting Uber.
Yeah, level 70 is also a good point where to say this, because that's when you get the world tier 4, and that's the last time you significantly change your gear ever.
Lilith, this is sort of the high point of the game right about here, and then after you've achieved these things, the in-game itemization, etc., goes down with the occasional artificial spike that might happen as people are either engaging with the new season mechanics as they come out, although some of these spikes have been quite good, season 2 is notable, or creating, for instance, new characters. You might get these temporary spikes of enjoyability. Now, if you follow along with my Path of Exile explanations, you're going to know that the enjoyability of Path of Exile does not go up very quickly, and there's this giant gap that happens right about here. And this...
Okay, so I agree with this, actually. Last Epoch, Path of Exile, all have a worse early game started than Diablo 4, honestly. Diablo 4 gives you way more abilities, way more options at the very early game. And that's the best part of the game, because you're unlocking constantly new things, and it's kind of exciting. In Path of Exile and Last Epoch, that does not happen. Now, Path of Exile is notoriously bad for it, because the unlocks for abilities are just horrible. But Last Epoch is, well, better than Path of Exile in this regard, but it's not that great. For a very long time, I complained about two things for Last Epoch. One, the graphics, that they have improved, but they still need to improve a lot so the average person is satisfied. And number two was the early experience of the game. It was too hectic, too much stuff, people didn't understand what's happening, and it was cluttered, it didn't feel perfect. It wasn't bad, but I can understand how people would not like it.
Gap is what happens when people end up playing the game long enough to realize how much time it is going to take them to understand the game. This is hitting either the first difficulty spike in the campaign, maybe your first act boss, you hit Mervo or something like that. It can even happen as early as the beach, directly when you make your first character and open up the skill tree. So this...
Okay. So, that's POE. You know what? I don't agree with that. So, first of all, I have heard stories of multiple people getting to level 50 and never opening up their skill tree, not even knowing it exists, okay? I don't know how that's possible, but I don't think people lie about that, because I have heard it way too often, okay? And yeah, you want to know the greatest statistic about Path of Exile that exists? It's about the first time people leave the game. You know, the average Path of Exile player encounters not Brutus, but Hillock. Yes, Hillock. The guy who has no special abilities, regenerates life one time, and hits really hard. That guy. The average person that plays Path of Exile gets to him, gets killed, deletes the game, and never returns. That is unironically literally the majority of people who have ever played Path of Exile by GGG statistics themselves. Yeah, Hillock is literally too hard for the vast majority of people who play Path of Exile. Crazy. Now, admittedly, I don't know how this is going to work in Last Epoch. Technically, the first boss you encounter is a giant bird who has 2 mechanics, but I don't even know if I want to call that a real boss or even a mini boss. I guess it's a mini boss, right? But the first real boss that you encounter in Last Epoch is the corrupted council members, you know, that boss. Well, the corrupted council member, you know, that guy who turns into the abomination. That boss has 5 mechanics or 4 mechanics or something like that. They always go in the same pattern, so it's not really hard at all. But you need to understand, if people are finding something like Hillock, a creature with 0 mechanics, to be hard, how hard do you honestly think something like that council dude is? With 5 or 4 mechanics repeating in a row, in a circle. Unbelievably hard, probably, for the average person.
This beginning can happen quite fast where it drops off a cliff. But after that, if you continue to push through, then you're going to see the enjoyability graph slowly increase over time as players are learning Path of Exile, making new characters.
That's an amazingly steady line also. That's pretty good.
Figuring out new builds and being committed to the game until eventually you're going to see this continue the ramp as they try new game modes. Maybe they try hardcore, solo, self-found. Maybe they actually got their builds down, new season launch. They're enjoying it every single time more and more until eventually we hit this apex right here of the Path of Exile enjoyability crossing Diablo 4, but it does take a significant amount of time in order for these games to cross over. AKA Path of Exile takes a significant amount of time to enjoy, whereas Diablo 4 offers that enjoyability right from the get-go, which is what makes Diablo 4 so well right in the beginning and be accessible to most players, but Path of Exile expand their enjoyability over time. So if this is what the graph looks like with the 2 current most familiar ARPGs in this genre, where does Last Epoch fit into this equation? So after playing Last Epoch, I think I've got down how I feel about Last Epoch as compared to these two. Now, we're going to know for a fact that it's going to be more enjoyable from the beginning than Path of Exile. Like I said,
obviously, Path of Exile is trash.
Path of Exile's barrier to entry for the average player is very high. One of the things that Last Epoch does so well is make the game easy to understand while you're playing it. But I think it's fair to say that
True, you don't need any guides, anything at ever. You can skip all of that garbage, and you will still understand what's happening. Okay? Every button you have, you click, pretty much has an explanation attached to it if you really, really want. And then they have the codex that helps new people figure out things if they really need to. The biggest issue with Last Epoch, I would say, actually in the early stages, considering they made the graphics better, but they still can work on that, and they made the early game experience, you know, more fluid, not spastic like it was previously. I think the biggest struggle of Last Epoch is the fact that the abilities that you get at the start that don't really feel good. A lot of them don't really feel good. Imagine picking a Necromancer, your first ability deals damage to you when you cast it. Dude, that's not beginner friendly at all, honestly. That's by default pretty advanced. Most abilities in almost all games that damage yourself are kind of advanced stuff. But, you know, here it's a little bit different. If the early game abilities every class get would be better AoE, better looking, better feeling, I think a lot more people would stick with Last Epoch. For the Necromancer, again, the blood thing, oh my god, I honestly think it's horrible. I honestly think it's horrible, okay? Or Sanguinate also, it doesn't look too good, it doesn't feel too good to use. You know, these first impressions matter a lot. And I think they can be vastly improved, especially for the beginner skills. Now, Last Epoch, I would say, gets a huge jump in enjoyment when you unlock your, like, first 4 skills, and you unlock your second skill that you can get the skill 3 for. I think that's when Last Epoch actually gets a tremendous boost in enjoyability.
Diablo, the first time you play Diablo 4, you are going to have a lot of enjoyment out of the campaign the first time. I think it does the campaign the best out of any of these games. There's good cinematics, voice acting.
I don't like the campaign. I really don't.
etc. And the problems with the game are after the campaign, but not during the campaign. Whereas the Last Epoch's campaign is good. In my opinion, it's more accessible from a quality of life type of feature than Path of Exile, which makes the beginning of your game time in Last Epoch more enjoyable, but it's not as fun of a campaign, for instance, as Diablo 4. However, where Last Epoch...
I don't know about that. I didn't like Diablo 4's campaign at all, honestly. Mephisto had the only good voice lines. Every time you saw an Echo of Lilith, I was like hitting my face with my fist because reasons. Dude, most dialogue in Diablo 4 needs to be sped up from anywhere from 20 to 50%. Jesus Christ, especially the Echoes of Lilith. Those things need to be sped up by 50%. They speak so slowly. It feels absolutely unreasonable. Yeah, you see that? That's how they speak. In Last Epoch, well, it's hard to listen to the story, honestly, but the story is not that bad as much as I understand it, even though I don't understand it. The only good part of Diablo 4's story is Mephisto. Mephisto, mwah, absolutely nailed.
Starts to take over is right about the point that I was mentioning where Diablo 4 starts to fall off. And that is because what Last Epoch actually ends up having is a good amount of quality of life features that make the game not annoying as you continue. Right about at this point is the point in which Diablo 4's stash tab problems, lack of loot filter, once you get out of the campaign and start gaining...
This was when he said level 70. I don't even agree to that. I think Diablo... 4's problems with all of that become blatantly apparent around level 40.
The portion of the game where it's the grinding, etc. These quality of life features really start to become noticeable, which is why the game's enjoyability either flatlines or starts decaying. Whereas Last Epoch's both quality of life continues to allow you to enjoy the game, and then, in my opinion, flatlines a little bit here, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, allows you to continue to enjoy the game, as well as makes the respecking option very enjoyable as well. So we're also going to see Last Epoch getting these sort of artificial bumps like I was mentioning down here with Diablo 4, because respecking is quite easy, and that will give you these little jumps of enjoyment of, oh, actually, I don't want to play Smite, I want to play Judgment, or I want to play Warpath, or what have you, or I learned how to mix the two, or I got some unique item drops that actually are very impactful and build changing, and that ramps my enjoyability. Now, something you might say while looking at this graph, especially if you're a Path of Exile player, is, DM, why is Path of...
I think the best thing about this graph is the color choices. I think they mix pretty well.
Exile lower in enjoyability than we have here of Last Epoch. I mean, you're a big...
Because Path of Exile is shit. You know what's the best second part about Path of Exile? It's the fact that most people never even tried endgame. And for me, it's actually the same, okay? Path of Exile. A lot of people just treat it as a single-player game. They kill Kitava the first time. Not even the second one. The first time? And that's it. That's it. Game over. And you know why that is? It's the customization of skills. Path of Exile is just horrible. Anyone who has played Path of Exile knows, if you have played it even at a slightly mediocre level, that Path of Exile has no classes. There does not exist a thing called classes in Path of Exile. Everything is just a multiplier. The way you really play Path of Exile is you choose the skill gem that you want to level it, and then you choose the class that has the most multipliers. Because class identity in Path of Exile is literally just multipliers. There is no class identity other than that. It's just how many multipliers a class actually gives you. And in Last Epoch, that's not an issue. Every class is super unique, super flavorful, super everything. And that's why a lot of people just kill the first Kitava. Again, not even the second form of Kitava. Not even that before, the one that unlocks maps. They just stop playing the game there. And it makes sense. Because there's almost no ways to make your abilities feel different. Okay? Because Path of Exile, in its actuality, is just... It doesn't matter what kind of supports you use for a gem. for the average player, the skill is going to always feel the same. It doesn't matter if you're using a physical damage build, a converted damage build, or proliferate, or ignite, or whatever, or blah 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 blah. It doesn't matter. You choose the skill, and then your biggest upgrade to how you feel that it feels is pretty much just adding more projectiles or a chain effect. That's literally it. Nothing else matters.
Path of Exile fans, surely you think Path of Exile is the better, more complete, funner game to play. Well, in my current iteration, I actually do. However, we have to keep in mind something. In order for you, as a Path of Exile player, to enjoy it more than Last Epoch, and I do believe, to finish this graph, I think Last Epoch does plateau at some point. I don't think it decays, for instance, as much as we're seeing here with Diablo 4. But I do think it will plateau in enjoyability until they add more in-game. And by the way, speaking of in-game...
They already have an amazing amount of in-game. It's true, Last Epoch has less in-game than, Path of Exile. But Path of Exile has, a 10-year start on Last Epoch in this situation, okay? But Last Epoch is already coming out of the gates with pretty much the same equivalent of amount of content that the Path of Exile had like 5 to 7 years in. That's good.
In my last dev review I did, or interview I did with Mike from 11 Hour Games on Last Epoch, they actually mentioned or gave us a sneak peek, letting us know that in 1.1 update, the one coming soon, is going to have a pinnacle boss focus. They're actually releasing basically more in-game content is their first primary focus. So I'm sure that will help.
Yeah, that's going to be good. Again, their mid-game is fantastic. Last Epoch does not need more mid-game. The mid-game is already fantastic because all of their... All that you see at the early game and mid-game is pretty much refined, okay? The things I said that they can do better are technically nitpicks, honestly. So, yeah.
Aside some of these concerns. But I think this is a flat line in terms of enjoyability, and it takes Path of Exile longer to be able to cross over that enjoyable plateau. And part of the reason of that is because of this respec system I am mentioning. In Path of Exile, in order to get the most out of the game and continue to enjoy it and continue to have this ramping that happens with the Path of Exile, you need to be committed enough to be cool enough with making new characters. It isn't until your second...
I thought he's going to say that. I don't agree. I think in Last Epoch, maybe someone who's playing for the first time is gonna be like, oh, I found this new item. I'm gonna now make a build. Now I'm gonna delete all that I have done before and make a new build about it by resetting and respecking. It's nice, but I do think most people who have played Last Epoch more than one character are gonna actually play in the way that they find they find a new item. It's gonna be essentially 1-for-1 with Path of Exile. Path of Exile, people do make new characters because respecking is hard, but in Last Epoch, it's going to be 1-for-1 because people are going to find new items, they're going to finish what they want with the first character, and then they're going to make something with the new items that they got, if there's something like that. I think that's how it's going to be. So this is not a problem, but this is like late speculation, so, flip a coin and someone's going to be right.
Or third character that you really start feeling really good in Path of Exile. Like you're starting to ramp, you're starting to understand it. So your enjoyability continues to ramp, but only after that second or maybe third character. And often that coincides with additional seasons, meaning you have to wait for maybe there's one season right here and then another season right here. So it might take you quite a bit of time in order to have these seasons come out, in order to try again with the new character and to realize how much you actually love Path of Exile. This is what happened to me. It was my second league or season that I started to really start to enjoy the game. Whereas Last Epoch, this bar graph that goes all the
essentially, I think he's missing this, but there is this thing that people enjoy things that they understand. Okay, playing Last Epoch, playing even Diablo 4 for the first time is, you're struggling with things you're not understanding. Is this better? Is that better? Blah blah blah. All of these things, right? So whenever you play something for the second time and you're accustomed to it, that actually adds to your enjoyment. Massively, in fact.
Way up here to peak enjoyability, this is all on the same character because of the quality of life, how well they do the respecking, the variety of builds, and how much you can continue just playing your main character throughout the entirety of the time. If you mess up your build, you can respec it again all the way from the beginning. So this is all before the 1.0 release, and it's arguable that this graph I actually might end up crossing over Diablo 4 even sooner because of the new faction system they have. But in the current iteration that I've played, this is sort of how I'm feeling about it. I do think the Path of Exile, in my opinion, even though some people say it's an unfair comparison, and Path of Exile has been out 10 years and I had all this time to build, etc. I'm just going...
Doesn't matter. I don't care if it's an unfair comparison, okay? Do better. Do better. Yeah, I am kind of giving some leeway to last Epoch because POE has 10 years, but I'm not giving them a free pass to not do anything and say, well, we can't do anything. You know, Path of Exile has been out for 10 years at the end of the day. How are we supposed to compete? You try to compete at the bare minimum.
Going to compare them because right now you, the person watching this, is debating with my time that I have available after work, what game do I want to play? You're not wondering about in 10 years. So right now, I think Path of Exile, after you have a significant amount of time in the game, is more enjoyable in the end game. I think this is fair in most hardcore ARPG, not just hardcore from the death perspective.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be true. I think this is gonna be true. Because you know what matters in the end game, you know? That he's talking about that he is gonna play, but chances are 99% of you are never gonna achieve even close to. He's talking about having your 50th character and trying to make something that can one-shot the universe. And Path of Exile simply has more options to do so. And that is the enjoyment at this point, okay? Arguably, the enjoyment for the average person that matters the most is pretty much this part right here. Okay? Arguably, it's only this part. And then there's a slightly minor amount of people, less people, for who this part matters right here. But this part right here kind of doesn't matter almost for anyone except like 0 something percent.
But grinder ARPG players will probably agree the Path of Exile is going to feel better the longer you play it over any ARPG at the moment. But that does not mean that you should only focus on this small bit of the graph up here, which is the last portion of the time in which you're playing the game. This right here, this journey that you have with Last Epoch all the way is enjoyable all the way through. So your first character experience is going to be really good all the way up until in-game, and it's going to be all right in in-game, and there are some changes we will have to see. At 1.0, I haven't got to play.
Yep, pretty good stuff. Anyway, that was our boy DM. I need to finish this one fast. This was Quizzer Said, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.